2023 City Commission meeting to order, and we'll begin with the roll call.
Mayor Hassel,
Here.
Commissioner Reddy,
Present.
Commissioner Butler,
Here.
Commissioner Motta,
Here.
Commissioner Morse.
Here.
Mayor, we have 5 commissioners. The quorum of 3 has been met.
Very good. Please stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Our first order of business is some recognition.
Thank you, Mayor, Victor, and Rob. Anybody else you want to come up? That'd be great. All right, so I just wanted to take this opportunity. Vic has been with us for 22 years, and he's gotten some great statewide recognition, and I'll let the supervisor.
Thanks, Ron. Good evening. On March 29th of this year, Victor Ibarra was recognized at the Kansas Rural Water Association Annual Conference as Municipal Supervisor of the Year. Vic has been employed with the City of Manhattan for nearly 22 years. Victor holds a Class 1 and Class 2 Distribution Systems Technologist certification from the Kansas Water Environment Association. Vic and city water crews maintain over 300 miles of water main throughout the City of Manhattan. We now would like to recognize Victor Ibarra for his accomplishment of receiving Municipal Supervisor of the Year by the Kansas Rural Water Association.
Move this up. Hold that. There we go. All right. Congratulations.
I'll keep it super short. Norm Francis is our superintendent for water and wastewater for maintenance and distribution. So this is, I'll keep the story short, but Vic's always been demonstrated his leadership, not just in communication, but also in action. Remember back in probably 2010, 2011, I don't know if Vic remembers this, I was just a city engineer then, helping out the director of public works in the middle of a major snowstorm. I came up on Vic on Claflin Road, I think I was going eastbound, and here was Vic on a mini excavator. I forget what the temperature was, but here he was breaking out pavement, had a water main, had water running down the street. I think it was freezing as fast as it was coming out. And this is just one of many examples of his leadership and his dedication of his team as well. They work in extremely difficult weather conditions, all hours of the night and often on weekends and even on holidays. Vic and his team have a great deal of pride in returning services to the community, that being the water. This is just one of the many items that Vic manages, not to mention all the utility locations and isolations, all the construction projects. There's constantly conflicts. Vic coordinates, tries to minimize how many people have water shut off or pressure reduced so that businesses and homes can continue to have water. Not to mention new services to businesses and residential homes. So make us proud, Vic, and congratulations on your award. So that's my short story.
All right. We'll continue with a couple of proclamations. We'll start with National Child Abuse Prevention Month. We've got Megan Kramer, Carson Kober, and several others. You can introduce them later here.
Sure.
Very good. Okay, whereas National Child Abuse Prevention Month will be recognized throughout the United States during April 2023, And whereas preventing child abuse and neglect is a community problem that depends on involvement among people throughout the community. And whereas child maltreatment occurs when people find themselves in stressful situations without community resources and don't know how to cope. And whereas the majority of child abuse cases stem from situations and conditions that are preventable in an engaged and supportive community. And whereas child abuse and neglect can be reduced by making sure each family has the support they need to raise their children in a healthy environment. And whereas child abuse and neglect not only directly harm children, but also increase the likelihood of criminal behavior, substance abuse, health problems such as heart disease and obesity, and risky behavior. And whereas all citizens of Manhattan community should become involved in supporting families and raising their children in a safe, nurturing environment. Whereas effective child abuse prevention programs succeed because of partnerships created among social service agencies, schools, faith communities, civic organizations, law enforcement agencies, and the business community. Whereas together we can strengthen families and prevent child abuse and neglect before it begins. Now therefore, I, Mark Hattasol, Mayor of the City of Manhattan, do hereby proclaim April 2023 as Child Abuse Prevention Month in Manhattan and call upon all citizens, community agencies, religious organizations, medical facilities, and businesses to increase their participation in our efforts to prevent child abuse, thereby strengthening the community in which we live. I'll let you,
Thank you.
say a few words here.
Sure, thank you so much. Hi, I'm Carson. We have some of our staff here tonight. Tylisha Brown, Katie McGar, Aaron Porter, and a board member, Megan Kramer. We have more staff. We have about 12, but we just wanted to say thank you for letting us do this proclamation here. We changed a year ago from Sunflower, now I'm gonna mess it up, from Sunflower Casa to Sunflower Children's Collective, and we have moved to a really prominent location now on Points. You'll drive by, and all through the month of April, you'll see pinwheels, which is the symbol for Child Abuse Prevention Month. And hopefully you're gonna eat a cookie tonight too. So we'll be here again next year, and we're just gonna keep spreading the word and our pinwheels throughout the city all through the month of April and the rest of the year, because that's what we do. Thank you. At Grow Green is Friday, and she told me not to forget that. And we are absolutely on that list, and we would really appreciate any donations you could give. Thank you.
Thank you. They do have a beautiful new office if you didn't get there for the open house. Okay, the next one is the National Library Week. And we've got Eric Norris, the Director of Library, and Elaine Shannon, the President of the Board. There you go. Whereas libraries are accessible and inclusive places that foster a sense of connection and build community far beyond the walls of the building. And whereas libraries connect people to technology, providing access to broadband internet, computers, and training that are critical for accessing education and employment opportunities. And whereas libraries are places of welcome and offer opportunities for everyone to connect with new ideas through access to information and stories found in multimedia content, programs, and programming, in addition to books. And whereas in times of peace and crisis, libraries and library professionals play an invaluable role in supporting their communities both in person and virtually. And whereas libraries develop and maintain programs and collections that are as diverse as the populations they serve and ensure equity of access for all. And whereas to adapt to our changing world, libraries are expanding their resources and continuing to meet the needs of their communities. And whereas libraries have long served as trusted and treasured institutions for all members of the community, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity, or socioeconomic status. And whereas libraries are cornerstones of democracy, promoting the free exchange of information and ideas for all. Whereas libraries, librarians, and library workers are joining library supporters and advocates across the nation to celebrate National Library Week. Now therefore, I, Mark Hattasol, Mayor of Manhattan, Kansas, do hereby proclaim April 23rd to 29th as National Library Week in the city of Manhattan, and encourage all residents to connect with Manhattan Public Library by visiting online at mhklibrary.org or in person to access resources and services. Let you guys, who wants to say a few words? Oh, yeah.
No. I would just say that we have the best library around, and if you travel anywhere and you visit libraries in the destinations that you go to, you will notice that when you come home to Manhattan Public Library that you have come home. home, home to one of the best libraries ever. And Mayor, we don't have cookies, but we have a T-shirt for you. And we have some bookmarks because you probably want to come to the library, Friends of the Library book sale a week from this weekend, starting Friday night, running Saturday and Sunday afternoon. So we'll see you there.
I do just want to thank Mayor Hattersall and the entire city commission for this proclamation. And speaking on behalf of all of the staff that are here, just want to say it truly is an honor to serve this community. And it's been a pleasure since I've been here, and we look forward to continuing to serve. And speaking of the book sale too, I just wanted to give a thanks to the city, and in particular the Parks and Rec, for partnering with us and allowing us to have the book sale this year once again in the city pavilion. So I wanted to thank everybody for that. So, thank you much.
All right, the next order of business is commissioner comments. We'll start down on the end. John, Wynn?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, as she said, the Grow Green Match Day thing is coming up here on Friday, and I know a lot of people in the city concerned about social services, and you get a 2-for-1 match, and I think it's just a great way for the community to really show their support, and I really appreciate what Vern does over there, because what they do is much more than the city, through tax dollars can do. So please take the time to donate a few dollars to whichever agency you choose. They've got an entire, page of them on their website. You can print it out and decide what to do and take it over there on Friday.
Anything?
Yes, I just wanted to say, we just recognized Child Abuse Prevention Month. And I just want to say the governor just signed a bill which was unanimously voted on in both the House and the Senate for statute of limitations. And what this does is, especially for child sex abuse, it used to be that there was no statute of limitations in rape cases only, but this expands it to any type of sex abuse for children. So I really appreciate this bipartisan support and the survivors that worked so hard to make sure it was heard, and they've been working on it for years. So I just wanted to say, here's a piece that speaks to collaborative efforts, partnerships, leadership also making it a priority, and just the bipartisanship that we have in Topeka. And it's not a prevention for child abuse, but at least it provides another option for survivors. So I just wanted to thank everybody out there.
Very good. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which are items that are of a routine or housekeeping nature, or those items which have been previously reviewed by the City Commission. A commissioner may request an item be moved for separate discussion and consideration immediately following the consent agenda or at a different point on the agenda if so desired. Does the commission have any questions or comments on any of the consent agenda items? We will need a city commissioner to serve on the selection committee for item E, which is the professional services qualifications for the Sunset Avenue project. I'll be happy to do that. Any other nominations? All right, well, you got it, buddy. All right, well, we will turn this over to the public for any comment on any of the items on the consent agenda only. All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move we accept the consent agenda.
And second, it's been moved and seconded, and Commissioner Butler will be appointed to that selection committee. Please call the roll, City Clerk.
Commissioner Reddy,
Yes.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes.
Mayor Hassel.
Yes,
Motion carries 5-0.
very good. On to the next thing, which is our public hearing. This is to consider vacating a travel and utility easement for Lot 22 of Grand Mere Unit 1, 2801 Heartland Valley. Ben Kearns.
Okay, what do we got going on here? I apologize, we got a slight technical.
glad to see you have the same problems the rest of us do.
Guess so. Let's see, just did a repair. I got backup.
It never happened.
That's all right, no worries.
Maybe we just need a refresher or something. Let's go back to what the deal is. Let's go for it. Hopefully, oh, this one works though.
Oh,
Well, that's
no.
that's the old one. I don't know what the deal is with yours. All right, yeah. This one, yeah. Just go ahead and plug it in.
Okay.
What you doing? Yeah, it's. Oh, yeah. We could do that. It's There we go.
Okay, where are the controls?
Just click, I think, or scroll.
Okay, there we go. Okay, I apologize about the delay there. Before us, we have a vacate utility easement at 2801 Heartland Valley. This is the easement was originally included in the final plat for the Grand Mirror Unit 1. Applicant has requested this vacation. They'd like to put a swimming pool and a deck in. Right here, this is an exhibit. So basically, here's the property, the boundaries, and then there's this utility easement. That was, like I said, it was originally part of the plat. It's not being utilized. As I said, no utilities are currently in the easement. We've reached out to the utilities. They've responded and all support the vacation with that. We have the motion that find no private rights will be injured or endangered by such vacation, that the public will suffer no loss or inconvenience thereby, and approve first reading of an ordinance vacating a portion of the utility easement located at Lot 22, Grand Mirror, Unit 1, also known as 2801 Heartland Valley, Manhattan, Kansas. Sorry, Riley County, Manhattan, Kansas. So, any questions?
Any questions for the presenter tonight? All right. In that case, we'll now open up the public hearing. Members of the public, sorry. Yes, members of the public that have signed up in person on the list may speak. Otherwise, if you have any comments on this utility vacation, please come forward. You'll have up to 5 minutes to speak. Any takers? All right, in that case, the public hearing is now closed. Any other comments, Ben? Nope.
Nope.
All right.
I have a
More
question.
questions?
I do have a question. I found lot 22 on your map, and I can't tell where the easement runs through it on the map with all the lots.
The big
'Cause I-
plat.
The large plat, yeah, let me go
Okay.
back to that. So it is, let's
Because I'm
see.
sure it's not a rectangle, I can tell.
It's on the
Far east
backside. Let
corner.
me-
Keep going.
I can see lot
21,
22, I'm just looking for
2.
where the easement runs through it.
Because it
That's north.
goes with,
It's
Oh,
probably,
the map is sideways.
it's not earth shape.
North is to the right on the plat.
yeah, so there we go. So it is right here.
Yeah, that's 22, but, okay. Never mind, it's not the end of the world. I wondered where it was, where
Along
it
the
is.
back edge, it looks like. then.
Correct. It's
Where it
adjacent
runs
to the
through the
green
lot.
space of the, I'm sorry?
Where does it run through the lot is my question.
Right here.
Easement.
Can you see that up there?
I know where it's at. I've got, yeah. The back side.
The backyard. Yeah, the backyard adjoining, I believe this is a golf course. green.
Well, I don't know, you know, it's a pot, shape of a piece of pie, so it's hard to know. Thank you, I just wasn't apparent.
Okay, well, any other questions? If not, is there a motion from the commission on this? Please. Somebody find it?
I guess that's just number 2 on there, but I move that
Yeah.
we find that no private rights will be injured or endangered by such a vacation on this easement, and that the public will suffer no loss or inconvenience thereby, and that we should approve first reading of an ordinance vacating a portion of the utility easement located at Lot 22 of Grandmere Unit 1, also known as 2801 Heartland Valley, Manhattan, Riley County, Kansas.
Second. All right, it's been moved by Commissioner Butler, second by Commissioner Mata to approve this. Any other questions or comments? All right, please call the roll.
Commissioner Butler,
Yes.
Commissioner Motta,
Yes.
Commissioner Morse,
Yes,
Mayor Hassel,
Yes,
Commissioner Reddy.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
very good. We'll move on to the general agenda for a discussion about reviewing and providing feedback regarding the housing incentive programs such as rural housing incentive districts and moderate income housing districts. Stephanie Peterson, Community Development Director.
Good
You're up.
evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Yes, as just mentioned, having a discussion tonight on a couple of the housing incentives that some other communities throughout the state have been utilizing recently. I put this in here as a reference. We can come back to it at any time, but just kind of a reminder of the different number of rental and for sale units that we will need over the next 20 years, according to the housing market analysis. Also on this graphic, it splits out those needs by AMI, area median income, or the household income. The two programs that we'll discuss this evening, one of those is MIH, Moderate Income Housing. That is either a grant or a loan program from the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation, or KHRC. That is a nonprofit organization that was, or corporation that was formed to manage all housing funds that go to the state. And then the second of those is the Rural Housing Incentive District, or RHID, and that program is managed through the Kansas Department of Commerce. We're going to start with MIH. It's somewhat less complicated than the RHID, and then you'll kind of see how MIH and RHID can work together. First, I did mention that that is a grant or a loan program. KHRC decides whether you get a grant or a loan, and it's for vertical construction, so nothing with infrastructure. It's actually to put a building on the site and go up. It can be for single or multifamily projects, and KHRC actually provides a little bit of a broader definition of the workforce housing, or the median income that we can serve with that. They go up to 150 AMI. Our definition of workforce housing is 60 to 120. That just means that we could potentially do projects that are a little bit, maybe the $300,000 range, versus for workforce housing, we've kind of defined it as at a lower amount. This is restricted currently to any city that's under 60,000 in population. So we are, I think Manhattan's probably the largest city that is eligible under this program. And the city does have to be the applicant. We would work with the developer to go after a grant, but we would be the ones that are administering that grant. We would have a development agreement. So there would be quite a bit of work on the city's part in order to administer such of a program. A couple of the benefits: it provides up to $650,000 for the construction of housing units. Recently, there have been some ARPA funds that have been added to the MIH pot, so the grants are much larger, in the millions right now, but that isn't going to be a long-term type of solution. Typically, the $650,000 mark is about what the max that you would receive. And kind of how this works is that enable, or when we incentivize a developer or provide them a grant for that building construction, it potentially lowers the sale price if it's a collection of homes, or if it's a multifamily building, you could have a lower rent cost because the cost of construction isn't as high because we're helping to subsidize some of that. Yes.
How is it determined whether it's a grant or if it's a loan?
That's a great question.
Okay.
And I don't know if, John's had a lot of conversations with KRWA. I don't know if he knows that, but it kind of seems like if maybe they run out of funding for the grant, then they look over to the loan portion.
They will also look to communities that have taken advantage of the programs before in the past and successfully implemented their grants. Those communities will get essentially a higher ranking, if you will, if that makes sense. And so in that way, communities kind of have to prove themselves and their ability to manage the programs effectively and efficiently. So,
Okay, thank you.
It's still somewhat of an unknown, and I think the KHRC is kind of figuring it out with each round. It's they're on round 3. Correct. Yeah, so this is pretty new still. Establishing a MIH or going after funding for MIH, I think that it would be really smart on our behalf to have a certain set of criteria that we identify in advance of having any specific projects come to us. So I listed some of those. Some of these I pull from the Salina housing policy that we included in your packet. They don't address MIH in there, but a lot of the same criteria could be used. So for example, establishing a minimum number of workforce housing units we want with any project that comes forward. Are we wanting to just do one single family house? Or are we wanting to make it a larger project? It requires almost the same amount of staff time either way. So if we can get more housing units with one of these grants, maybe that's something we're looking to do. We also may want to specify the percentage of units that we're looking for either below a certain rent or within a certain rent range or for a sale price. We could say that we want a certain percentage to be workforce, we want a certain percentage to be market rate, and then we can have a scoring matrix that corresponds with that. One thing to look at is the proximity of parks and community services. So really identifying, is there a certain location that we want to be able to incentivize housing? Do we want it to be kind of in the sprawling areas of our community? Do we want to, in greenfield development, do we want to encourage infill? We can do a combination of those. It's really what we want to see, and it comes down to geography of where we want those units to be located. And then this kind of goes back to the first point, but having a minimum density per acre for a project. Again, that can go back to the location of it. Yes?
That would be our call. That's not a prerequisite for the grant application that it's
Correct.
close to community services and parks. That's just something that Salina or they thought was important on a local level.
Yes.
And which we might think is important too.
Correct. So all of these are just criteria for us to consider. KHRC does, you can kind of look at the types of projects that they've funded in the past, and you can kind of get a sense of what they like to see or where they want to see that, which we could do a lot more digging and provide you something to react to and provide a recommendation. These are just considerations right now as we move forward.
Could you give some examples of the community, what community services means? I mean, I could
Sure.
think
So
of wide
schools,
range.
hospitals, grocery stores could even be in there.
Okay.
If we're talking workforce housing range and specifically anything that's 60% AMI, transportation could be a burden. So do we want to locate housing at, let me jump back up. So 60% AMI, so that's $41,000 a year in a 2-person household. Do we want to try to provide that in an area that's more walkable, that you could actually get to school or to a job? Or are we wanting to incentivize something that maybe requires you having your own transportation to move about? Again, just things to consider. It's part of the conversation we need to have with you all and as a community of what we're trying to accomplish.
Where we have available land and,
Yep.
you know, like in Northview, there are hardly any services. It's almost all residential except along the highway. So I was trying to think what might apply out there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wait.
Stephanie, before
Yes.
you go too far ahead, you mentioned vertical housing or vertical structures. Can you just explain what that means to me?
The actual home or the actual building. we'll talk about the next program we'll talk about is all for infrastructure. It doesn't have any building cost associated. So this could be the labor to build the house, the materials for the house, whether it's single family, whether it's multifamily, anything that's above the ground.
They won't
Above
pay-
the ground.
Won't pay for the land, won't pay for the infrastructure.
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So, okay, that's what I wanted to know. What does vertical mean? I haven't used that, heard that term before.
Concrete up,
Yes.
or slab up.
And then as far as implementing this, we would likely have a development agreement with whoever the developer is. We would specify in this the number of units that we expect to see out of this project. We would have a specified price range, acknowledging that you're going to build X amount of homes within this cost. And we can even keep those homes within a certain range over a period of time. So typically for MIH, it's maybe a 10-year period. So we could say over the next 10 years, these homes, you can only gain a certain percentage off the sale of that home, just to make sure that it stays within the workforce housing range or whatever range we define that. If we're going to be incentivizing development, we don't want it just to turn around in 2 years and it be out of that price range again, however we define it.
Question on that.
Yes.
I think you're saying, and that's totally up to us to decide how to do that agreement. But whatever we decide, is that part of the application that they're going to look at and say, yeah, we kind of like what you did,
Yep.
or no, we don't like what you did? So,
Absolutely.
Okay, it's kind of.
Yeah, if it's a loan, KHRC does have a agreement with the developer, even though the city is still the applicant, so they'll specify a couple of things, but what you just said, yes, that is all up to us, and we would include that in our application. This, just to show you a couple of different communities across the state that have utilized MIH so far. Like John and I mentioned, we're only in round 3 of this. It hasn't been, it's a very new program, but there's really been a variety of things that you can do with this. You can do rental units, you can do for sale units, you could do, we could define it, and it goes back to our housing market analysis and what we see as the need, and answering some of those questions I brought up before of what kind of housing do we want to incentivize? Do we want to incentivize it? I'm going to go on to RHID because it kind of starts tying back in how the two programs work together. And even for MIH, the KHRC really likes to see that there's an RHID in place because you're utilizing multiple tools. I don't, that's one of, if you've applied for a grant before and you've been successful, that gets you more points. If you have an RHID, that gets you more points. I think they're really trying to encourage you to kind of utilize all these different tools that are available. So an RHID is slightly more complex, but it works very similar to a TIF. So if you're familiar with that process, you've all been down that path several times. It's just like that for the most part, but it's for residential development. Right now, it is only for cities that are under 60,000 in population. And even before that, there was a smaller limitation on population size. So there's places like Dodge City, they've been doing RHIDs since 2009. And they have 12 of them in place, and they have 9 more ready to go. So this isn't new by any means, but for a city of our size, it is a new tool available. Essentially what it does is captures that incremental gain in property tax. With a TIF, I believe it's 20 years. With an RHID, you can actually go up to 25 years if you need to in order to generate enough tax to pay off those eligible public improvements, which include infrastructure and land acquisition. So now that's where the two programs start to come together. The RHID can only pay for what is actually on the ground, no structure. And it's any sort of public infrastructure. It could be streets, it could be sewer, water lines, sidewalks. It also, unlike, it can pay for land acquisition and actually site prep. So if there is a site that has a structure that needed to be demolished, you could utilize that. The benefits of RHID, it incentivizes building homes at a lower price point because you're getting some of that infrastructure paid for by that increment, that tax increment. So it has the opportunity to keep costs lower for future occupants. And I have some examples that we'll go through, and hopefully it demonstrates what we mean by that. But there's not having specials on a lot. So if you have a subdivision of single family homes, you make maybe that home a little bit more affordable because you don't have the specials that are tacked to it. You could also potentially reduce the cost of that home. Let's say it's a $300,000 home to develop. We're creating an RHID, and now the developer can sell that home for $250,000 because they don't have as much of the cost of the infrastructure wrapped in. Just as some examples. One of the other benefits of RHID is we have the ability to renovate any second floor in downtown. So it has to be in any area or any downtown district that has a building older than 25 years old. So we could encourage having people live in our downtown and renovating the second story of those downtown businesses. Aggieville would be eligible, however, there's a TIF in Aggieville and those two programs would compete. So we're just talking downtown for this.
And when you say second floor, are you literally just saying second floor, and if there was a third and a fourth, you couldn't, or is everything second and above?
Second above? Okay. We do have some 3 stories, I guess, down there, yeah. And then the other one, the state encourages pairing it with MIH.
So does that mean you'd submitted a proposal to each and cite one to the other in your application? Okay.
What you'd probably want to do is to develop or to designate your RHID first and then submit an MIH application saying that the district's already been established, because we'll see here in just a second, that process takes quite a bit of time and buy-in.
Okay.
Here's some examples of RHIDs across Kansas. This is even, they've done more with RHID than they have, others have with MIH. And you can really see that there is a lot of different opportunities that we could look at. I won't go through all of these. If there's any that you had specific questions about, I'm happy to answer those.
Yeah, how did Holzberg come up with 150 townhouses?
I'm going there to check.
I'm guessing,
I don't have that answer, I'm
guessing
sorry.
that's not Olsberg, but some other, town besides Olsberg. There's not 150 houses.
That's our
to start with.
Oldsburg, right, north of here?
In Pottawatomie County,
Yeah. Yeah.
Or they could always plat or plan on 150.
They may not be built right now. So when you create the district, you create a development plan saying over a course of however many years we're going to construct this amount. So, or I could have just hit a 0 and it's supposed to be 15. That, I guess, is very possible too.
Good for them, anyway.
But so if you go up to Oldsburg right now, you may not even see a single one. I don't know the status of theirs. So the development plan can take many years to actually be fulfilled.
Okay.
I'll just say for Hayes, they were having some issues attracting employees to work at their hospital. So they specifically went out and designated an RHID to construct apartments and tailored that to try to recruit people to work at their hospital.
So it was near their hospiel? Is that?
I don't even know that.
the
I just know that they said that's why they had gone after
Yeah,
it.
the hospital, they talked about this over the weekend. They said that, the hospital basically donated the land. So it's right next walking distance to the hospital to make it extra super easy to
Yeah.
get to work.
That makes sense.
See, I didn't even know that part. Okay. Again, criteria, this is, Salina actually has these identified, and I didn't even list all of them there. But again, the number of size, a minimum size for projects, that's really up to us and how, if we want to go after, a lot that has 3 housing units on it and that suits our needs, then we can do that. If we're wanting to focus on larger greenfield sites where we can get 50 single-family homes, we get to define how we want that to look. It does have to tie back to our housing market analysis, and those identified needs. One of the considerations that Salina used was that a new product was being introduced to the market. So for example, row houses or small lot single family homes, cottage homes, those aren't things that we see a lot of developers building right now. For the small lot single family, potentially it's because they can't make it work financially for them to develop that. We can speculate of that, I guess, but we could try to encourage the developers to provide a product that we haven't seen yet, to see if that maybe appeals to a different set of folks that we are not providing housing for now. They do use walkability as one of their considerations. Again, the proximity to parks and community services. And then this is a good kind of planning technique that we learn, is having a mix of housing densities. So having, maybe it's a multifamily building that's kind of along your main artery or collector, and then you have townhouses a little right after that, and then you kind of move into more single-family homes. So you could kind of create just a mix of different housing types. If you wanted to, that would probably be more suitable for greenfield development rather than infill, since we're talking about a smaller lot with infill. And again, to implement this, we would have to have a development agreement. We would agree on what you're going to build and what that price range is, and probably specify for a period of time what we want those houses or that rent to be in.
And the city's also the applicant for this, like the MI.
This is,
Nope.
we're not even an applicant. We are creating a district through a resolution. And I think that's my next.
We don't have to have the state's approval to create a.
We do.
Yes, you
Okay.
So that's what I'm going through right now.
Okay, never mind, let's.
This comes
Hold on,
directly
hold on.
out of, oh, yes.
I have a question. So I'm glad you're going to be getting to this, but since we are creating a district, unlike what's that? The Aggieville TIF district, where, entities have to sign off on this as well. But in this district, even the other properties need to be appraised and sign on to this as well?
What do you mean by other properties?
Like, you're not just gonna look at an individual, like the Wareham, you're not just gonna look at that and say, oh, they wanted to apply for this. If you're creating a district, each of one of these entities need to sign off on it?
So district is a little bit deceiving. District could mean one lot. It could mean the Wareham, or it could mean one building in downtown. It doesn't necessarily have to be how we would define like Aggieville district or downtown district. Okay. So they can be as small or large as we want them to be.
They're 5 acres.
Mainly because if, 5 acres, okay, so that's the minimum then?
No, it could be.
No.
Could be.
Yeah.
Because how would you, my thinking is, how would you if it's just one, it would be harder to capture enough property taxes.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you may need more than just the individual one.
Yep. That's where we start playing the financial game of how many properties do we have to make it work, or how long do we have to have that TIF or that RHID run? Is it 25 years? Can we capture all the money we need in 10 years through that tax increment? That's part of what we would do as part of this process.
What about adjacency? Can you have a variety of sites within the district that maybe there's others within there that aren't part of it?
Yeah, you could.
So you could have, you're in there and you've got a lot of open lots, some dilapidated houses, whatever, and you say,
Some
we
established-
want to do all those, but you have some that are fine.
Yeah.
And you just leave those alone.
Yep.
So they don't have to be connected then, as John says. You could go down to a couple of streets here in town and pick 10 lots and say that's our RHID, and they may not be connected.
Well, it goes back to, we would want to make sure that, I don't know if we want to do kind of 10 lots like that. We may want to actually designate that whole area because of the public infrastructure. So if we're using the RHID to improve public infrastructure, the chances are, even if a house is fine, maybe that infrastructure in front of it's aging. So we'd want to replace the street or the sidewalk or the water line.
That's fine.
So,
Because we're not building houses with RHID, we're just improving the public infrastructure or acquiring land.
Okay, so
Then
in
to
other
build
words, you
something.
could designate that and then use the other thing, MIH.
MIH to actually build the
fix
structure.
Individual house.
Yes.
And of course, I'm thinking, again, the streets we talked about, Colorado, Pierre, Yuma, we've got destroyed sidewalks and, we've got brick sidewalks that are covered with grass. And
Yep.
this could be a great way to renovate that, though there's no specials on those at this point.
Correct.
But it would cause specials if we actually went and renovated that. Okay.
The piece of that I guess I would just give a comment on, you do establish a base, no different than a TIF. So you have to think about the incremental increase to the improvements on the private property to pay for whatever public improvement you're talking about. That's why these are more effective in greenfields that are generating little to no revenue. If they're outside the city, they're generating nothing for the city. So everything would be incremental in that circumstance. Going in town, you're gonna have to make a pretty substantial improvement in that home to have your Riley County appraiser, increase it significantly.
So if you had a 4 square block, 2 blocks, 4 square block area, it's even the houses that nothing would happen with them, they would be included in that fixed,
It could.
could be.
It could be. Yep.
Okay.
You would
And
use
they
that.
could, it's about that base
Yeah.
being established, and then anything above it. And even in Aggieville, the first 2.5, 3 years, we didn't see a whole lot of growth. It wasn't until that hotel got done that we actually saw a substantial amount of above base value growth. If you just look at, a residential neighborhood, we can give you all kinds of history on that neighborhood where it's been, or whatever district boundary you want to look at. But I would just encourage you to think about that increment is truly the financier of whatever you're talking about. And if you get into existing areas with existing structures, you have to be careful too with TIFs of going into areas, and this happens very regularly. You establish the district, then people start tearing things down. Your base is still the same. Even though you tore something down and the value dropped to very little, that base stays the same, and it's got to come back at a higher level than it was before. So just nuances in financing of TIFs that apply here as well.
Can you make, can multiple RHIDs, like we have multiple TIFs
Oh, yes.
wherever we, or can we just declare half the town as?
So we would typically, a good example, Dodge City, they have 12 established RHIDs. They have 9 others that have a development plan that are just waiting to move forward. So we can designate several different RHIDs.
Wow.
So when you say.
Sky's the
when you-
limit.
Sorry, when you were comparing us to, comparing Dodge or giving that as an example, and you mentioned a vacant lot which has nothing, you would capture a lot more on that as opposed to something that's already there and then capturing just a smaller amount. So because we have very little vacant space in the city of Manhattan, are we including the county in this process? Is it just the city, or are we working on a few partnerships there?
So we have to include the county and the school district as part of the RHID process.
Right, but I meant as far as looking at land. I mean,
Oh,
they
we
have to
haven't
vote
even-
on it.
So we haven't even started that yet. I think right now what we've really been approached with are developers that are interested in utilizing these programs. Some of those developers have been successful in other communities. And so at this point, it's really developers approaching us saying, we have this lot, we have this idea, can we move forward with something? So we haven't gone out and started seeking properties.
Yusha, I think I read that counties can apply for RHID too.
They can, as long as the city doesn't have
Yeah.
jurisdiction over that
Right,
land.
exactly, out in the county.
I understand that we need their vote on this as well,
Yeah.
to comply with all the processes. But I was just, as you move on, I think the discussion will further. If developers are coming to you, that's very different than if we are doing it on our own. So though, even though both can apply to these things, but I'm glad you brought that up because that's probably what initiated the whole conversation.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
the financing work a lot better if somebody tore down or took a little house and made it a $400,000 house with a lot more value, but that defeats the purpose of the process of making more affordable. So it is a balance of trying to figure out, we'll have to see how this infill thing.
So I think a good example with infill is if we want to talk about South Point's area, and maybe there's 4 single-family homes that are kind of in bad condition. They aren't appraising well. We're not collecting a lot of taxes off of those. The potential to acquire that land and then put back, maybe it's a multifamily structure because it's close to downtown. It supports that higher density. That multifamily structure would generate a lot more taxes than those 4 individual homes on that lot. I mean, that's just an example for you.
Okay.
How does this work if, because I know I've talked about a few of our meetings about those choice neighborhoods and doing that, can these things work together with something like that? Or they pretty much have to keep them separate, or what's the?
Yep, so choice neighborhoods, that's actually something that John and I have been doing quite a bit of research on recently. Choice neighborhoods, the first part of it is the actual planning part of what are the community facilities that we need. It's more about actually providing support, providing service, providing rehabilitation back into some of our older neighborhoods that are a little bit more worn down. Is it improving a park? I think, is there a community facility that needs to be improved or needs to be built? And then the implementation of that, as I understand it, it can go towards housing, it could go towards a community facility, it could go towards park improvements. There's really a variety of implementation dollars, but I think the big picture is all these things are going to work together. We're going to have a plan, an idea of what we're trying to accomplish, and then utilize all these tools almost in tandem. I think it's still hard for us to, as community development, to still say what that looks like because we don't really have a sense of where we want to go. And that's something I'll get to on my very last slide, I guess, are questions back to you all as the leadership in our community of what is your guidance? What are you hearing? What do you want us to do next?
Stephanie, do you mind if I comment real quick?
Go ahead.
Commissioner Morse, the Kansas Department of Commerce does not look fondly upon large swaths of RHIDs, whether it's half your city or all your city. So with that said, to reiterate, you can have multiple RHIDs.
Right.
But they do not look for the whole city or half of the community to be.
Not like an enterprise zone or something.
Right.
I'm not surprised. I just was pushing the limits to see.
Now I will go through this very abbreviated process. All of this is spelled out in statute. So that is, this is kind of their process that lays out. So the very first step is we have to have a housing needs analysis. We have that. That is our housing market analysis. So step one is complete. Should we want to pursue an RHID, the second step then is you all passing a resolution that makes a statement of some findings and determinations. For example, that there is a shortage of quality housing, that we need housing within a certain range, that the future economic well-being of the city depends on us providing these incentives. So there's actually 4 of these. We would have to go through and we'd have to use that data from the HMA to support these findings. So that's resolution number 1. When we would pass that resolution, we then have to send it on to the Department of Commerce. Commerce looks at that, they say, yes, we agree that your findings match your housing market analysis, and we are comfortable with you pursuing further the next steps of this process. So then we get down here to the development plan. This is when we actually start working with the developer to specify what are the geographic boundary of that district, what is your development going to look like, how many housing units, what type of housing units, just all of those details that we need to know in order to really have a clear picture of what we're trying to construct or produce. After that process is done, which I imagine would take a substantial amount of time just given the detail, and especially if we did our very first one, I imagine will take a little bit longer. Then we get to step 5 here, which is the second resolution. That resolution just says that you are planning to create an RHID, and it spells out, excuse me, in there, that you're going to have a public hearing, and you just have to publish the date of the public hearing, the contents of what that development plan looks like, that we have the plan here at City Hall that anybody can come and look at. So that resolution is really just more of a formality saying we're going to have a public hearing. And then we actually hold the public hearing, and then by ordinance, we would end up adopting that redevelopment plan, and that would basically create this RHID. Somewhere in the first 6 steps, we would want to be meeting with Riley County and with the school district, because they have veto power at the very end of this. After you publish your ordinance saying we've created this RHID, they have 30 days to veto. If either of those entities decides we don't want to be a part of this, then the process is done. There's no, we can't opt to move forward without both of them on board. So it's not spelled out in statute that we have to meet with them, but just in good partnership, I think we would want to do that before we got to the end and heard otherwise from them.
I would think before you spend a bunch of money on the development plan, you'd like
Yes.
kind of like have a pretty good thumbs up going.
Sometimes what other communities will do is get a resolution of support from the county and whatever would be the same of the school district, just to kind of get a better sense of, yes, we support this project. So that's an option.
So Stephanie, when you did the housing needs analysis, I would assume there was outreach to school district and county as well, or at least,
I'm going to defer to John because I wasn't here
Okay.
during that part.
Yes, they were invited to participate
Right.
throughout the entire study.
so at least I think there would be consensus that we do have housing needs in the community. So I think that would be the foundation for all of this. And certainly we want them on board during those conversations, but I think they understand the need for the housing study and workforce issues that we have for housing, I mean.
What we'll get into next is an example of how RHID works and how we are really committing future property tax to a development, and how that's what we're asking the county and the school district to do, is forego that future revenue for up to 25 years to build a housing project.
Like a tip.
Stephanie,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
so we're in the process, I assume the developer needs to control the land prior to submittal to Commerce, or even the first resolution? Not the city that's controlling the land, it's the developer.
Not necessarily. So resolution number 1, we wouldn't have to have that development plan ready, so we could still be going through annexation, rezoning, land acquisition, because we can use RHID to acquire land. So that could be part of our development plan, is that we're going to use that district to actually acquire it.
In many ways, you can imagine it like an invisible layer that could say, sit over a piece of land or several pieces of land, and we say, we're suggesting this is our RHID, if that makes sense. In those first few steps, it's just a layer that says, we would like to designate this as our RHID. It doesn't have to be controlled by the city.
And it doesn't commit us either.
Yeah, I think this is not unusual in the sense when we do a TIF district, we go through a similar process where we capture a certain baseline, and then we capture the property taxes
Yep.
above that baseline. So I think they would be familiar with it, but as far as when we say, if a piece of land is not already on the tax rolls and you're starting from the very basic, then they weren't already collecting taxes on that anyway. But if they were to, then it would go towards this housing district, I would assume.
Well, if either the county and the school district wants to help with affordable housing or not, that's the bottom line. If it's important for their employees and various other, for the whole community to have more affordable housing, then I would expect them to sign on. And if they don't sign on, it means they're not interested in helping with affordable housing, and that's all there is really to that.
I think we want to work with them and collaborate and invite them into the process.
We absolutely would. I
Get
believe
cooperation.
on Monday,
We're on the intergov this month to go through this same presentation with the intergovernmental group, so hopefully we'll get a good show.
All right.
Can I walk through a couple of scenarios? This really goes back towards the financing of it, and maybe even more importantly, what that does to the taxes that we collect. This is, I will just preface this is a very basic, simple scenario. The values were just something that we kind of pulled out, so this isn't any given project. But we're going to start with scenario 1, which is just our vacant lot today. The appraised value is $25,000, and so then you see here the total taxes that we collect is about $454, and then below is broken down by each of those taxing jurisdictions, not only the dollar amount but also the total mills of that. At this point, our developer investment is $30,000. That was for them to buy that lot, and they have no other improvements on it today. So that's kind of where we're starting. Scenario 2 is going to be a market rate development, so there's no incentives, there's no special assessments. We're assuming that they're just doing all of this out of pocket. So again, same purchase price, but this time that developer had to put in $100,000 of public infrastructure. That could be roads, sidewalks, sewer, water. And then they ended up building, you can envision this to be whatever you would like, but ends up having 3 different units, they're attached, and that costs $700,000. So we could have, let's say they're row houses. So we have our total developer cost of $830,000. After this is done, they get some tenants in there, and the average rent on this to make it break even for them is $1,900. And then you see here in blue, our workforce housing target rent. This is just outside of that. And we created no workforce housing units with this just market rate scenario. Just a comparison of the numbers, if we don't have any incentives there, you see really what we're looking at is this last column, the difference column. And if we come down, I highlighted the city's taxes. So we actually, off this project, this is the amount that we'd be collecting in revenue every year from this housing development going in. So what it comes down to after we get through all of these, are we willing to give up this number every year to create this housing? So scenario 3, we're going to have a lot that's developed only with RHID, meaning that the developer's only going to be getting assistance with the infrastructure. There's going to be no help with the cost of the building construction. So the purchase price, I showed it in red to suggest that the RHID is paying for that. Same with public infrastructure. The building cost was out of pocket for this developer, and so we have our total developer cost. Because the RHID participated in some of those expenses, they were actually able to lower the average rent to $1,600 a month, which is within our workforce housing range. And we've been able to create, using the RHID, about 3 workforce housing units. Now this is where we marry RHID and MIH, and you can see the improved benefit. I won't run through everything up here other than to say that this developer was awarded $300,000 in MIH for the construction of this building. And between RHID and MIH, they were able to offer rent in this building for about $916 a month, which is it's at the lower end of that workforce housing range. So we created, again, 3 workforce housing units, but you can see how using those 2 programs together provides even more benefit to that end tenant, whoever's residing there. This just takes all of the different scenarios we went through. Really what I would highlight is the rent charged. That was the main difference in each of these, how those different financing programs came together to create an affordable product. And then when we look at the property tax impact, we're going to say that this is a 10-year RHID because they were actually able to collect the number or the amount of taxes they needed over a 10-year period to pay for that infrastructure. So after 10 years expires, then this amount that you see here, this $150,000, that would actually go back onto the tax roll to begin collected by the taxing entities. Here's the difference between the vacant site and then the RHID. Again, this is what we're acknowledging that we're giving up as a city every year in order to incentivize workforce housing being developed. And that's the same thing that the county and the school district would be asked as well.
Can you go back to your last slide? And you touch on this in the end when you get to your last slide, but if we do this, what we will hear is the current landlords are going to say, look what you're doing. You're going to have these low-cost units competing with me, and I paid full tab on these. I still like all this, and I'm still for it, but that's what's going to be talked about.
And that's why I think, Salina, they're dying for apartments. They need apartments because they got all these jobs and they want apartments. We don't want apartments. We got plenty of apartments. We need single-family houses, duplex, half duplexes, townhouses, row homes, something that people can get into for less than a couple $100,000. And that's why, yeah, I'm not all that jazzed about, if you can maybe tear down 3 houses and put up one 12-plex, we'll get a little, gripe from that probably, but if we have, a whole bunch of them, that's not gonna fly. So, I think we have to continue to make our focus single-family, some things. It doesn't have to be one house on a 1/3-acre lot. It can be, I've always thought, half duplexes is a good way for people to start their equity.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Uh-oh.
No. I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. You said we want single family, but are it also owner occupied?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it could be townhomes that are
I
owner
love
occupied.
love townhomes,
Okay.
row houses, anything that's less expensive than a single house on a piece of land that.
Okay,
that-
so the owner occupancy is really what
That's
you're.
the important thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think, listening to Commissioner Mata speak about this, I think that's where we play that fine line, because there is a need, and nobody's filling that need, and that's kind of what's holding back when we did the housing analysis. We don't even know if we qualify for any of this. We're just trying to utilize the tools that are out there for everybody in the state of Kansas, because this is such a problem throughout the entire United States. If we qualify and we won't even fix the problem. We're still putting a Band-Aid on the problem. So I think, there's just so many moving pieces in it, and everybody would be eligible to apply for this. All developers can line up to apply for this, so we're not even excluding anybody, and we're hoping more will take advantage of it, so there's more options in our community. We still have to work within our zoning limits, we still have to work through all of our codes that we have, and I think that's probably where we need to go, because we have that substantial need, and we have voters who voted for 10% of the sales tax to be put aside to workforce housing, and this would supplement that need. So I think that would be the main thing, is that it would be a competitive process for all developers wanting to do this.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I'm just, and I'm for it. It's just, yeah. It's just, that's what will come up in here.
I think with regard to complaints, though, that, some developers use tax credits, but we don't see that because that's on their income tax. It's invisible to view. And other tools that we have, we call economic development tools, benefit the developers too. And this is just another option for us. We're not going to redo the whole town. We're just going to do some pieces as we can find that we fit best. So I think that's another way to look at it.
And that's really where it's going to be crucial, that those criteria that we went through in the first part of this is defining exactly what the product looks like that we want to incentivize. Because we can say it's only owner-occupied units, and it's only, I don't even know what the other ones are. I mean, that was one that I kind of heard. So we have the opportunity to create this or construct it into what the product is that we're wanting to incentivize. So just keep that in mind. But that's part of the feedback that we will need from all of you as we move forward in this process.
I think we're not that interested in, I agree with Mark, in rentals. We have an abundance, a predominant, just overwhelming majority of our units are rentals.
Continue? Okay.
Yes, I agree with that. That'll get around John's issue. If we say owner occupied, then the people that are renting can't say we're competing with them. So I sort of like that.
Okay.
I've had another thought, but I haven't got it clarified yet in my mind, so I'll figure it out and I'll ask you in a minute.
Okay. So this is, I'm sorry?
Another question for you. I mean, you put this in, you put the incentive in, so you've brought down the cost of the house. So now some house that would have cost $300,000 or more is maybe $225,000 or $250,000 or something, and that's in the agreement. So you got to sell that house for that amount of money, because that's what they're going to have to stay with. How does the appraiser look at that later? Because, another house, it may be nicer than another house that's appraised a lot more money than that. Are they looking at the sale price or say, oh no, that's brand new construction compared to this or that? What's the appraised value come out to?
I don't know that. I'll look to Jason.
I don't think the appraiser is going to look at it any differently. They're going to look at it from a square footage perspective. The sales obviously drive a lot of the values in our neighborhoods. Us regulating what someone can sell a home for the first time it changes hands is one thing. Holding that value and someone selling it again in 5 years or 7 or 10, that it'll ripple through that neighborhood. It's what Roger went through in Northview when he started selling homes for $85K, and within months he was at $135K. It was what the market was suggesting. We do offer a different dynamic than the list of communities that have done this before. I mean, Manhattan is vibrant. We issue a lot of building permits on an annual basis. But for the last 3 years, it has shifted dramatically. And talking with developers and home builders, a house that they could have built 5 years ago for $275,000 is over $600,000 today. The bigger question is, how are you going to get a $250,000 home built in Manhattan?
Right. My question just is if, because the way I understood you talked about this agreement, that 10 years or whatever, you could still say you couldn't sell it more.
Yeah, you could say you only get 3% increase
Increase a
regardless
year.
of what the
So,
appraisal is.
you know, if I was arguing with my appraiser and he said, you got to pay what it's equivalent across the street, I'm saying, time out, appraiser, I've got a contract here. I can't sell this thing for more than going up 3% a year. Now, when you finally hit the 10th year, phew, you could go off the chart.
Yeah, and I think the details of the plan and what we're going to require owners and developers to do are yet to be determined. I think we have flexibility there. If it's about selling that new home for the first time at a certain price, I think you have much more control over that. When that house resales, I think you can lose control, you can try to maintain it. Trying to maintain it, I think, is problematic. But I'm sure communities have tried to do it, and they may be successful in doing it. But the market pressures in our community are much different than what other communities
Right,
face.
but if you don't do that, are you really getting the effect that you wanted?
And
Or
are
are
you-
you flipping?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to require the buyer to be in a certain AGI then? Or can they, only people with a certain income can purchase it to start with?
Yep, we can restrict that.
You can get very detailed, but again, the more you put in, the more you're going to scare off people. The more, I mean,
Well-
not scare off, you know what I mean. Just,
Yeah.
It's going to be more cumbersome. It's going to be more difficult for that developer and that builder to buy into this. That you do have to kind of back up to the beginning of these things and look at who's paying for what, who's taking the risk. And if the city's taking all the risk, the city can write all the rules. But if you're going to shift some of this risk to a developer, then you're going to have to come in and negotiate just how these terms are really going to play out. Today, we get developers petition us, water, sewer, streets, storm, grading, all the public infrastructure that goes into future specials. We issue that debt. We rely on developers to pay that, or future homeowners to pay that through specials. These RHIDs are relying on future property taxes to pay those specials. So if we continue our practice and we take the risk on all the infrastructure via a petition in a benefit district, and they don't produce a home, now you've got to look back. Or the house doesn't generate enough to cover
Right.
the infrastructure. Now you got to look back to the rest of your revenue streams outside of this district to cover that. That debt has to be paid. But the product is what makes the RHID or a TIF work. It has to be the product. And the product is something you're attempting to also hold down in value.
No, that's the,
Yeah. At the same time, you've got to pay a bill. So we've looked at analysis internally. We know a 30-lot subdivision is easily $2 million in infrastructure. At a minimum, that house has to have a county appraised value of $250K just to take the property tax payment and put it right into the special assessment payment. Now, over time, the value of that home will go up, but your cost for infrastructure will stay the same once we debt service it. So you do gain over time, and I think we had a $2 million infrastructure subdivision ultimately generated $2.6 million in revenue via property taxes. So you had $600K to play with at the end of the day.
What were you kind of figuring the inflation rate or the growth rate of valuation?
We used 2% on the home, and we financed the debt for public infrastructure at 3%. That was our scenario, Mark. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take long. I mean, 20 years of 2% growth, you get to a value that's pretty significant. But go ahead, Commissioner, sorry.
But isn't it possible also, when I think about the economic development tax, you know, over 10 years, that's gonna be about 6.5 million, maybe more.
Oh, on the housing side?
Yep.
It's 800,000 is what we've projected now at $8 million, yes.
Okay, and so my point is, you know, you could put this in place, this RHID, and then that economic development money is your safety net in case things don't go right. You just don't spend it all and you say, okay, you know, this is here, and if the RHID works out, then good, we got the 8 million. If it doesn't, then this could backstop it. So I think those things need to be blended together so that we minimize the risk, which is what you're talking about. I fully agree with that. Because we don't want to be stuck, you know, with the other homeowners and subsidizing us.
Well, I think the value, even if it's 8 million, is going to end up being the same, because everything else is going up as far as costs are concerned. I think that's something you need to check into. If we build it with all of these funding sources and the tools that we have, the next time you sell it, if you have to sell it at fair market value. Or I don't know if you can have a resolution that says you have to sell it within a certain margin and not fair market value. Because if it's increasing dramatically, then, the reason the TIF district works is because any business that builds in Aggieville right now or sells it is going to make money, and we collect on that property tax. We don't have a threshold of, this is the only amount you can sell it for. We don't have that kind of, and that works for us because then we can get those funds. And if we are looking at capturing those property taxes, we also can't have a limit on some of that. So I don't know how all of that would work out, but I think, I would assume they have to sell it at fair market value if they're going to sell it next without a threshold.
I think we may need to think of this as a first-time home buyer deal, where it's an opportunity for people to get into their first home at a more affordable price. And that's why you can't, like, if you buy one, turn around and sell it a year later, you can't come back and buy another one because you had your chance, buddy. And so it's the people that want to buy a house and then hopefully stay in it. That would be the ideal thing for the homeowner. We'd be fine with that because it continues to provide them an affordable house. It's when they start turning over that everything gets complicated, and if you start people come in and buy one and then try to rent it out or something, skipping and skirting the rules and stuff. But we might want to think of it as a first-time home buyer's deal, because that eliminates a few things. It incentivizes that first-time buyer. I don't know, think about that.
And we could look at examples from other communities and ask them, how have you done this? How did it work for you? What do you wish you would have done different? Yeah, we absolutely can.
We all know residential property can grow up dramatically in our community. We know that. We've all lived here long enough. We've all experienced it in our own homes. We've watched homes sell for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. If you own a home in Manhattan for longer than 10 years, you may have even seen it double in value. Raise your hand if you have. I mean, it's true. It happens. So here you are trying to create subdivisions where you know anywhere from 4 to 8 to 10% growth is possible. Can you put things in place that prevent them from selling it? Maybe not selling it, but penalties in doing so, where you pay back the city? Possibly. We have that in place with our home rehab. You know, we'll put $25K in a home, and they can't sell it within a certain amount of time. If they do, they pay us back, a portion or something associated with that improvement. You could get into that type of language and that type of approach if they sell.
Yeah, I think the first-time home buyer thing solves a lot of that, because you got somebody an affordable house, then after that, it's your business, so to speak. Yeah, we could trying to clamp it down gets really complicated. And if somebody suddenly gets transferred a year and a half into their home, it's like we told them, well, you can't sell it for 3 years. So now what are they going to do? They're going to rent it, and then I don't know. Go ahead.
Before we even get to that point, I do think we have to talk with our builders and developers, because the product that you all want to incentivize, can they build 30 of them in 2 or 3 years and keep them at that price? Because they will be getting pressure to do so, and the only way this gets paid back is if they do build them. So they go in to build these things. You say you want 30 of them, all at $250K. They get the first 10 built, and they're at a point where their labor, their cost, whatever it is associated with materials, is in excess of what you agreed to. Now they won't build the next one because it's 300 at a minimum. So we've got a lot of things we're going to battle, and we are at risk because we have financed a couple $1 million in infrastructure before they can even really start on those homes. So there's a sequence of events and who's taking risk, and then there's a commitment from a developer to build the product, and it's how long before that product is unaffordable for them to do. Then you're back in this room going, okay, we agreed to build 250K. Now it's at 300. Are you still okay with moving forward?
Well, what would be the downside of your scenario where the first 10 are sold at 250,000, and then the next sell at 275? If we're not doing some kind of a requirement that you have to have an AGI of certain percentage of poverty or something, then we could, at some point, you're going to maybe run out of first-time home buyers that can afford a $275,000 or $300,000 house, I suppose. But if it becomes a situation of not getting it built, not getting the RFID paid back, or you build slightly more expensive houses that anybody can afford, and that people with a little bit more money can come in there, it's not like I just think you could build something and sell something if it gets to that point. We intended it to be a low-income housing thing, first-time home buyer thing, and it worked for the first year and a half, and we got 12 people into an affordable house. After that, items beyond our control, the cost of everything, inflation got too out of hand, and we couldn't continue it. Is that against the rules?
We do have a development plan that we agreed to, that you passed a resolution, an ordinance that Commerce signed off on.
Okay,
So
there's the problem. Commerce.
I would
Well, isn't
envision
it
that if
dependent
we-
on time? I mean, if you go over, if it's taking you a
We
year or
probably
two
could build
for
in
so many,
something.
can't you build in there? Because it all pertains to the index. Does it have to be a hard number, or can it be a number that's going to fluctuate based on those indexes?
We could have it where if it takes 3 years to develop the 30 units, where each year you're able to, we recalculate what that 60 to 120 AMI looks like based on the inflation factors or what our newest area median income is. So we could build that in.
Or is there some way we could sort of phase one is the first 10 houses, and then, I don't know if you could have phase two of a new RHID would be the second 10 houses, and at that point, something might be different, but, and maybe if somebody's got 20 acres, maybe we start with 10 in the first RFID, but RHID, and if it goes well, then we could try it again. And if it doesn't go well, then I can sell develop that other land as market priced or something, so.
And the number of lots may be a big factor here,
Yeah.
but you also have to think about all the infrastructure you're putting in.
Well, you wouldn't put on all of it for phase two or something.
Well, you could forecast it. Let's just narrow it down to 10.
Okay.
So now you've got all the infrastructure that you would do for 30, and now you're just doing for a third of the area. You know, your costs aren't going to be a
Well,
third.
I would
but
just say, yeah, don't do infrastructure for the whole
right.
thing, but.
So you dial that back, and you take it down to a manageable spot. I do think Manhattan and Salina, and I read through their housing policy. I think it was a great document and a great adventure, and I know Stephanie's going to touch on this. They do some things different for multifamily that you may have some interest in, but they also recognize they do specials and benefit districts for traditional housing. I'm not sure they do specials and benefit districts for RHIDs. And it's a big piece of this in terms of who takes the risk for the infrastructure, knowing that future property tax stream is going to pay for it. Does that developer have that risk? Should they have that risk, or should the city have that risk and that infrastructure? Because you want to talk about motivation to get your houses built, take the risk of the infrastructure. Whereas if you place that risk with the infrastructure with the city and our traditional approach with specials, what risk does the developer have other than just meeting the agreed upon purchase price? You know, once they meet that, then they they go to the next house. But they've got so many different pressures on them just on building a home. We haven't strapped a developer with infrastructure costs in 40 years. And if we start doing that, you know the reaction is going to be, it's going to cost my house more money. So this is something Salina wrestled with. I imagine we're going to have to wrestle with it too. But again, just another way to look at that risk and who holds it, who carries it, and ultimately, how does it get paid for?
I do think the other factor that we have that a lot of others don't is a much quicker turnover. Our houses turn over a lot more. That my personal belief is that's why you have natural built-in inflation every time a house sells. So our housing costs are higher because the turnover rates and the frequency of sale is much higher, much shorter time. So you may have a situation where you may have a first-time home buyer that wants to get out in 3 years. Well, year 4, you're going to start paying the specials. So if you sold it at a higher rate and you can't deliver on that, so you're going to start paying the specials. That's going to be added to that house sale. So there's lots of different things you do, but these things aren't easy to administer.
Yeah.
And it's why the county always opposed our neighborhood revitalizations program, because you got to have people in finance and people in community development and other places that are tracking all this stuff.
And that is one of my questions that I want to ask, is about the administrative burden to the city, and you kind of touched on it. But we don't know what you don't, maybe Salina has some experience, and maybe you'll talk with them, but it depends on the level of what that burden is. And is it a half-time position? Is it a full-time position? If we just do a 30-unit subdivision, is the burden so great that it's a full-time position? And how, it's all relative.
Yep, and that's going to be difficult to answer. The more stipulation that we add to that project or to some sort of deed or whatever it looks like, it's going to take a lot more staff time to have to monitor and constantly kind of keep up with that. So it's hard to say how much staff time it's going to take. We don't know how many we're looking at. We don't know how large they are or any of those details yet.
By the time we get there, some of these communities might have some history.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of my questions out to Salina right now is how long does it take you guys to administer and manage these programs?
I can't wait to find out about Oldsburg.
If it's 150 or 15, yeah.
Yeah.
And Jason's exactly right. Salina, they don't bond an interest any of their RHIDs. It's in very rare circumstances, they said that they might. It's up to the applicant or the developer to come up with all financing for that project, which gives the developer a little bit of incentive to actually deliver on that project, because they're going to be left responsible for whatever that RHID does not generate at the end of the project.
When did you have?
And we aren't obligated to pay for the infrastructure we could say that on RHID, we want the MIH part to pay for the infrastructure. I mean, anything's possible is all I'm saying.
We could say with an RHID that the financing is up to the developer, that the city is not going to bond and interest it like we would for special assessments or for benefit districts.
All right, let's go on to the next one. And then
So this is my last slide, I think, yeah. I think most of these we've already kind of covered. If there's specific ones that you have additional questions on, I mean, the creation of competition, we pointed that out, that if we start talking about rentals, you guys are probably going to hear about it. I think the other thing is the burden to other taxpayers. So during that let's just say it's a 25-year RHID term, we're essentially putting whatever taxes we're not collecting that are going to pay for that infrastructure, the rest of the community is supporting operations, is supporting maintenance of our roads during that period. And then the fairness issue, by whatever criteria we establish, we're picking winners and we're picking losers. So just something to be aware of, that we are going to be selecting which projects we want to fund and what kind of housing. Not that we shouldn't do that or we can't do that, just something kind of as a heads up that we might make there may be certain projects that individuals want to bring forward, and our criteria just don't fit that product. I think and I'm kind of going back up to the top now, I think we already talked about the geographical considerations, making sure that we have proximity to existing infrastructure. That'll help to keep some of that public infrastructure costs down, but really just identifying, are there specific areas that we want to target? If we're talking about just owner occupied, I think that might just naturally narrow some of those areas. One thing that we're doing within community development right now is trying to create a map for you all to see based on the MDC of where can we have additional densities, if we can have townhomes, if we can add single family homes, just to give you a sense of what opportunities might be out there right now.
I would look to your office to identify areas of town where this would apply and
Okay.
where developers would, where it would be the most beneficial, because I don't want to burden the city, for instance, with a proposal that's on the south side of the bridge, where the infrastructure costs to the city would be significant. We have to think about the city's costs to do this. How long do you think this process takes? Maybe, John, maybe you have a sense of, if we were to apply today, how long would the application for this RHID and MIH, how long would those take?
RHID could take up to 6 months. It depends on Kansas Department of Commerce agenda and docket, how many they have before them. And MIH, as Stephanie alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, is currently a quarterly program, and so they're trying to always have 3 to 4 rounds of applications, review, and award 3 to 4 times a year.
Okay.
So the next MIH application is in June. RHID, you can go at whatever time. I would say that for the first 6 months is probably ideal once we actually have a process established. I think it's unrealistic to say that we could get one done in 6 months because we still have a lot of work to do as far as what does a developer agreement look like, what are our selection criteria. All of that we would need to work out before we started to identify any potential districts.
John, do you have any idea what percentage of MIH applications are being approved? Is they doing like 50% or 30 or 90? Almost everybody who asks gets it?
They have not released that percentage lately. Mainly that's due to, I'm sure you've heard this repeated several times, but in the 2022 legislative session, they exponentially increased KHRC's budget for this program. And so that's that's the main reason of what leads to a lot of questions not being answered is essentially they're starting over, if that makes sense, with a lot of these programs because of that huge amount of funding they have. So yeah, they leave questions like that unanswered for right now, so.
All right, very good. Any other questions for Stephanie right now?
I do have, there was a reference to immediate, medium, and long-term housing
In my presentation?
And I was looking quickly to try to find out where that was in one of the criteria.
Salinas policy, maybe.
Salinas policy, okay. So that was their definition then. Okay, I won't ask that.
Still got that.
Let's see. I have to ask about what cottage homes are. Are they what we used to call tiny homes?
Grandma's
So
house.
I actually hid a slide on
accessory.
here. That's what a cottage home is. An example.
Yeah.
They don't have to look like this. They could all look the same, but they're in really close proximity. They kind of share a similar open space. You're able to get a lot more density in a smaller amount, in a smaller lot. But this is just to give you an idea of what that
Is it like a tiny house? Is it like an
Nope.
accessory
Nope.
apartment above a garage?
No,
Or
these
what-
are all
what is it?
individual little housing units. So just think small square footage homes
Okay.
that they don't have they don't have an individual yard. They kind of share this common space that's out here. And then I added this is actually, I think this is in Kansas City. This is an example of what row houses would potentially
Row
look like.
houses, but those would be basically apartments though, too, I mean,
They could be owner occupied.
yeah.
So it's very similar to a townhouse. So those could also be, and then these could be owner occupied as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I was looking at the Salina plan, and I think on page 7 of the 11, it had something about evaluation, and it says, only rental projects qualify for IRBs. IRBs are exempt for new property taxes created by the development for a period of up to 10 years associated with project costs. And it went on to talk a little bit more about IRBs and sales tax exemption. Does that fall into all of these also then? They're asking, they can get a sales tax exemption and a property tax exemption?
Go ahead.
It's an approach. So Ron mentioned the NRP program earlier. It is a way to avoid going to the county and the school district and asking, are you willing to participate in affordable housing? You can do industrial revenue bonds for multifamily housing, meeting a target level of income or rents that you desire, and you can grant a 10-year tax abatement. You can do that. You, the city. So Salina has taken this and has targeted specific products in specific areas of their community and allowed them to use IRBs. So the city issues them, they get the sales tax exemption on the construction, they get the 10-year tax abatement, and they basically just notify the county and the school district they're going to do it. But it's multifamily basically within their, what do they call it, their neighborhood
NRP.
area. They created a neighborhood area that they will do this for development. It's the scenario that Stephanie gave you earlier. 4 homes, older part of town, or next to campus. Look at I'm not saying you would do this for TJ, but what TJ's done with 11B, 12B, and some of the stuff on North Manhattan where they assemble homes and then they come in and they make multifamily units, you could do that with IRBs if that developer will create a product that you all agree is the appropriate amount of rent.
Right. So I understand that, but I don't understand how that falls into what was just being proposed, because the idea with the proposal with the rural incentive program is to capture the funds from property taxes.
It's a completely separate
This is different.
program.
So
It's
this
just
is-
another
And they're just trying
That's something we
to put a
could have done
tool.
anyway, with or without this.
It is, but they're targeting it for affordable housing.
Right.
They're not targeting it for market rate. They're not targeting it for students. They're saying, this rent, this place, we will give you a 10-year abatement.
Right. And so in that case, after they build it, can they sell it then?
This is rental, though. Salina did only for rental.
Every year, there's an analysis on that 100% tax abatement. I'm sure they have agreements in place that stipulate what you have to continue to do in order to leverage that abatement.
Okay. Because there's just so many moving pieces, and sometimes it's the fine print that
Sure.
we don't see. And I don't, if we're thinking about capturing property taxes with one type of housing tool, and somebody not having to pay property taxes with a different type, then I want to make sure we are understanding what's going on with all of those thought processes and doing what's in the best interest of our taxpayers, because ultimately it does shift that tax burden to our residential property owners.
So the RIB route it's a different philosophical approach. I think it's one of several tools Salina's using to create that, but there's good risk aversion there in that tool, because you're not giving up property taxes you're already getting necessarily, maybe on some land, maybe on some lower value, but the developer has to finance all that. You're just a facilitator. There's no city money at risk in those IRBs.
And so that scenario with IRBs is a completely different scenario than all this other stuff we're talking about. You can't combine the two. That would be crazy talk. Okay, that's what I thought.
It's their local multifamily strategy in specific areas of their town.
Okay.
And I don't think our IRB policy currently allows us to incentivize residential.
It does. We've issued IRBs for multifamily that are tax credit because we added that provision, I think, back in '06, where multifamily for affordable / tax credit homes, we would do it. And we were just doing it for the sales tax
Right, we've
exemption.
never done
alone.
the tax abatement, right.
No, just metal arc and.
I want to point out too that Salina is really spread out. They have a lot of vacant land within their community. I mean, you drive, it takes forever to get across town, and there's a lot of room for infill there, and I think we're more compact and have had. My priority for discussion is affordable housing, and that's what we have. Our study says we need, it's what our voters said that we want to focus on. You don't have to go look at anything. Affordability we have some people who can't afford to live here. And so I would like to emphasize and stress affordability. I don't want to be at the top of that income range where we can reach and the high end of it. I want us to be in the category for affordable, and we're using the word workforce, but our initial effort focused on affordability.
So when you say affordability, is it this right here, this workforce housing range? When we get below this is where it starts to get into Manhattan Housing Authority and public assisted housing.
I'm not interested
Okay.
in public housing.
So the workforce.
Public
okay.
housing is a niche all of its own. And then we're in the next level up, I would say, you know?
I was just,
Yeah.
everyone has a different
I know they
definition
do.
for affordable, so I wanted to
And-
make sure I
and you're
understood.
asking questions is causing me to have to come up with something. So that's what I would say.
Okay.
Why don't we let you have a break for a second? We got a couple of real estate interested people out here that may or may not want to come up and comment. I'll open up some public comment on this whole housing initiative idea stuff. Scott, Josh, either one? State your name, who you're with, and you got 5 minutes.
Good evening, Josh Brewer, Manhattan Area Habitat for Humanity. Stephanie, thanks so much for that clear presentation. I wish I had seen that when I first started digging into what is MIH, what is RHID. But this is really helpful, I think, to get all of us on the same page on what these tools are. Big picture, there is more money available now than we will probably see in the rest of our lifetimes. And these tools are well-funded. We may not completely understand them, but I think we've got to use them while we have a window to use them. A couple things that I thought about when listening to that presentation. Habitat for Humanity, we specialize in first-time home ownership. We've built 30 homes. We're building our 31st right now, which is actually a cottage home, a cottage cluster across from Ogden Elementary. So we know that housing type that's detached, single-family residential. So we know that housing type. We know that it can be affordable. We can deliver those units under $200,000. The only way we're able to do that, of course, is by using students. So we partner with workforce development programs, and we are training tomorrow's construction workforce while we build workforce housing. As we understand the housing problems, we kind of put things in 4 buckets. There's a land problem, there's a house problem, there's a financing problem, and there's a buyer problem. And we kind of talked about a lot of those, and they start blending together and they get pretty overwhelming. And so I like to keep those separate. The one piece, I think we talked about a lot about land and housing prices tonight. The financing piece is increasingly a challenge in the private market as interest rates go up. Habitat for Humanity has a 0% interest mortgage product, so we kind of outcompete the market on that. But if we're talking about market rate mortgages, as those interest rates increase, combined with increasing insurance cost and increasing property tax cost, we're really starting to get a buyer challenge. What low-income home buyer is able to pay the principal payment, the interest payment, the insurance payment, and the tax payment every month with what they take home, especially in a market where there's inflation. The other piece on the buyer challenge is just getting buyers through underwriting. What we're seeing is even though our product is being delivered below market rates, I mean, it's really us that's able to put that in the market right now. we're still seeing that gap between what low-income buyers are able to achieve, you know, with their income, the top end of their income, and what they're able to get into from an underwriting perspective. We're seeing that get tighter and tighter and tighter. So to find that buyer that can get through underwriting is increasingly difficult. I think just want to go on the record that from Habitat for Humanity, we are in full support of using RHIDs and the MIH. There's been several funding rounds available now, and we have not stepped up to the plate. We as a city have to step up to the plate and just take a swing. And I know it may not be the perfect solution, but we've got really smart people in the development community. We've got a great community development team. What they need to hear from you all is step up to the plate. We got another funding round coming at the end of June. Let's submit a proposal. Worst thing that happens is we get a bunch of money into our community to build housing. Now, there was a conversation about ownership versus rentals. Obviously, we specialize in creating homeownership opportunities, but what we do see here as well is there is significant demand projected in the rental arena. If we do not meet that rental demand, it will push on the low-income homeownership opportunities. We're already seeing that in the traditional neighborhoods where homes, it's better from a financial perspective to chop up a home and turn it into multiple dwelling units. If we don't meet that rental demand, and we don't supply that rental demand, so I don't really have an interest in this, we are going to see increasing pressure on the ownership market. In the limited time I have here, there's talk about how do we ensure that subsidy that we develop is stewarded long-term. There is a product called a community land trust that has been used in Douglas County really effectively, and that can ensure long-term stewardship of the subsidy that we bring to the table. And I appreciate Jason talking about who owns the risk in these developments, but I think we also need to ask who's going to own the benefit and who's going to own the risk of us doing nothing. Thank you.
Do you happen to just, I know you're interested in pursuing this. Have you got some land identified or any kind of penciled out drawings in your head or something that you're ready to move forward with fairly quickly?
I know of some land that is currently vacant, and I know of some developers that are interested in, including me.
Good, 'cause, yeah, we were talking earlier a little bit about the city telling people where there's land. It seems like developers are a lot better about finding places to build stuff on than the city would, and anybody else normally would imagine, so, thanks.
Yep.
Oh, I forgot that.
There are also some dilapidated houses in our community that the windows are out of and nobody's lived in for 3 years, and code is fussing with the owner about not getting anything accomplished. So there's that also as some locations.
There's also a bill to keep us from doing anything about it.
I understand, but it's just really frustrating when the house in your block is, and mine, I don't have one in my block, don't get me wrong, but
Come on up, Scott, sign in.
I've sent code pictures twice this week, in the last week, of houses that, where no one lives, hasn't lived for some years, and they're just deteriorating. So, kind of a blight on the community.
I'm Scott Seal. I'm a realtor here in town. I serve on the Housing Steering Committee. So I think first of all, I want to thank you guys for bringing this topic up. I feel like that is progress in and of itself, that we're now standing here having this conversation. I don't want to beleaguer the point about the availability of housing in general across for owner occupied, because I feel like it seems like after this meeting everybody's on the same page of that. But I think just a general point that I want to make, if you look at this slide, and Stephanie, thank you for putting that. I love this slide from the Housing Committee that we commissioned, which says we need everything. There's nothing in any segment of the market that we don't need more of. And so what we are really hammering is an all of the above approach. We need to be pulling on all of the levers. So yes, we need low-income housing. But as you guys mentioned, Manhattan Housing Authority and other entities are there to take care of that. We actually even need high-end homes. We are short on the high end as well, but the free market can handle that. What we need is the middle. And that's where the free market at this point in time cannot produce enough inventory to satisfy demand. And that is true on the owner-occupied side as well as the rental side. And there's, I think, somewhat of a misconception that we battle in this community that we are oversupplied with rentals, but the stats don't back that up. Occupancy rates are in the high 90s. And in the student population, it's a little lower than that, but it's still in the 90s. If you're talking about rental properties in non-student areas, they don't exist. If you want to go out and rent a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom home right now, it doesn't exist. And if you can find it, it's $2,000, $2,200 a month, and it's gone in one day. So I want to push back a little bit against the impression that we don't need apartments, that we don't need any kind of rental inventory, because we do. And I don't want to do that at the expense of owner-occupied, because I think we need to do that too. But again, it goes back to all of the above. We need all of this. We talked about Scorpion. If Scorpion does end up coming here, or any other future economic development project we have, that's fantastic. We have 600 new jobs. Where are those people going to live? That's an important question that we need to be asking, and they're going to need everything across the entire spectrum, from rentals to home ownership and everything in between. So I want to just make sure that we are keeping a wide-angle lens here, and that we aren't being too narrow in the sense of we miss out on some other things that we also need to do. And I think one of the questions was brought up, are there properties identified? I personally know of 2 situations where we have landowners willing to sell, developers willing to buy, and builders willing to build, both rental and owner-occupied structures, with a diversity of product, getting into row houses and things like that, that we simply don't have, that the free market is not providing. The free market builds 5-bedroom, 3-bath, walkout basements, and 3-bedroom, 2-bath slab homes. That's what they build, because that's what they can sell and make money building. But we need more than that. We need, and they don't do it because it doesn't make sense for them financially without some sort of help. So we have several projects in place in areas of town that do not traditionally see investment and do not traditionally see development. All we need is the city to, as Josh said, step up to the plate and take that leap to do programs like this, to think outside the box and create things that the city needs. We have developers who are the kind of developers that we would want developing in this community, that are trying to do what's best for the community. And yeah, they're going to make some money along the way, but I think we've been burned over the years by some landlords and some developers that maybe didn't do things the right way. And the truth is, most of those people are cycling out of the game. They're not really involved anymore as time has progressed. And I think we need to realize that we've got some new forward-thinking developers that are trying to do what's right for the community, and we need to give them the resources to do it. And we need to, I also wanted to echo what Josh said. We have a tremendously talented city staff that is eager to solve these problems and eager to come up with creative ways to move our community forward. And I hope that the commission and that the rest of city staff can give them the flexibility and the freedom to go out and pursue those things so that we can have these projects and that the community can benefit from them. So, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Anybody else?
You know I'm going to say something. I've been taking notes. Nicolette Unruh, 7250 Troy Road. I would just like to, after listening to a really great presentation, I think you did a great job, Stephanie, and I really appreciate all the things. I really loved that we brought up Saline County. Obviously, you know that that's where I have my home from originally. Not really originally, but I lived there for a long period of time. And Linda Morse, Commissioner Morse, you brought up the the sprawling difference in Salina versus Manhattan. And Salina is a community of 46,000 people with a a square mileage of 27 square miles. And then Manhattan has a 54,000 roughly, according to rough Google estimates, and 18.79 square miles. So it is important to consider that when we think about it. And I will say that having been involved in Saline County for quite some time, it is important to consider if we do add on to areas and put into new infrastructure, that will put a pressure on us in the long term. So we talk about unintended consequences. I think it's something to be considered. And then I would also encourage the commission to think about Kansas leadership out of Wichita. We should probably look at engaging some unusual voices and in energizing others. We need to think about how we're working across the factions in our community and speaking to the loss, because this might cause some loss. And I think you all spoke to and alluded to that throughout your conversation. But we also have to intervene skillfully and hold to our purpose and make conscious choices. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right, we'll close public comment. So the thing, you said 6 months and such like that. My concern about getting some kind of a significant policy thing in place is we're going to try to foresee every situation that might come up, and then sure as heck, something different's going to come up. A proposal will come forward from the development community, and it's going to say, well, it don't fit our guidelines, so, and so that's where, so my concern is we're going to wait a long time, come up with a strict policy, and then there's going to be other stuff that comes up that we didn't foresee, and then we won't have we don't have to make some kind of we'll either turn it down because it doesn't fit our policy that we came up with before we had any ideas what people's plans were going to be. How can we kind of move something along a little bit without, I know we have to have guidelines, but trying to predict and foresee everything is impossible, and I think that's, So how do you see us being able to maybe kind of shorten this period of time of not being able to do anything?
We'll start with MIH. I think that one it could be a much quicker process than the RHID, where we have to have certain resolutions and get buy-in from the county and the school district. The unique thing about MIH is that we get one application each round, correct? So that application, let's say that Josh has a project and Scott has a project. They don't like each other. They do. We're just going to say that they don't for these purposes. Both of their projects they would bring to the city, and we would have to decide, does this meet our criteria? Does this meet our intent? Then they have to split that funding, that $650,000, between the two of them. We could then have some developer C comes in and they said, well, we went in on this too. And let's say that both of these individuals are providing a product that we heard you up here this evening say it's owner occupied, it's going to be in this location, and we're like, great. And then this other developer comes in and they say, well, we're going to go and build 72 apartment units right smack dab in the middle of downtown. Well, there's all kinds of reasons that wouldn't work for probably zoning issues, but we need some sort of minimum criteria to know what you all are interested in seeing to allow us to kind of screen some of those out at the first take. A lot of these projects, I shouldn't say a lot, some of these projects are going to require rezoning. Some of these projects may require platting. So there's a lot of work for these developers to do before we even bring forth an MIH application. You would see some of those through the rezoning and through that platting process, but us having at least an initial idea of what you're looking for and what you're willing to receive a grant for would be really helpful. So we can make those very minimum requirements as well.
Yeah, can you ask us yes/no questions? Do you want it to be owner occupied?
I would
Yes.
love that.
I think we could, if you ask us to dream up what we would want, I don't think we could.
You want to react to something.
Yes, but you tell us something, and when we can react to it, and when we could probably get you within 10 questions gets you a decent policy idea, I
Well,
suppose.
the other thing is, we're only talking about one application for this first one, for the first quarter, and another one for another quarter.
Yep.
So we need to kind of narrow it down and not just be talking about the whole of the city. We need to focus.
Well, I think it's kind of the chicken and egg thing, too. Do we try to come up with a program so developers are come, or have developers come so then we can develop a program?
I think they're having developers come already.
Yeah, we have a sense of what developers are looking to do. I would say and John can step in at any time, I think the owner-occupied part is going to probably reduce some of the applications that we will see, especially with MIH.
And it could be, initially, just to learn what people
Yeah.
want, you could have some RFP rounds. And y'all can be involved in analyzing those RFPs as to whether you like them or not,
If
and
there's a
prioritize.
If there's a June deadline, we don't have time for RFPs
No,
and
no, well,
big time.
Sounds to me like they've got some things in the works, so. If they want to try, I think that's the only real kind of fair thing to
The
do.
end of April.
We could put together a couple of points. That's something that we could bring back before you. I'll look at Ron if it's a work session or if it's at another legislative meeting and get feedback, the yes, no that.
For this
wanting.
first round, I'd like to see some low-hanging fruit. If we don't have to rezone, if we don't have to, all of these processes that take months to accomplish, we aren't going to accomplish any of that in June, by June or by December, probably, because it takes so long. I don't know what some of the more shovel-ready, kinds of projects might be.
Well, Mayor, I'm game to try it.
Yeah, I think so. I wrote a couple of quick notes, like, me, I'd like to see community development say, okay, here's some geographic areas we want to target. And I've spoken with you about that before. Then secondly, I like the idea of owner-occupied, but I don't think we should put a barrier there. Should we prefer owner-occupied, but if somebody comes up with a great plan, we shouldn't just say, sorry, it's owner-occupied only. If it's a great plan, let's relook it and have some flexibility. I'm all for the keep it simple principle, just like Commissioner Morris said, rezoning, we probably don't want to do that. We just try to stay away from that and keep it simple. And I think, we don't want to do 10 different projects, just a couple at one time. And then, Jason's point, we need to minimize the city risk. And so I think building in that economic development tax to backstop, possible losses is the way to go on that. But that's sort of my thoughts on it.
Do you know what kind of you said you don't know what kind of projects got approved?
Yeah, we have a whole list of them.
Okay.
John could probably rattle them off more accurately than I could.
Okay.
The only point I'd add, Commissioner, is that, again, I'd refer to the outstanding funding that they received. So when we provide any historical information, that was before this level of funding, if that makes sense. And so when you look at these previous communities, you're talking about cities under 30,000, 40,000 in population where they did one or two projects, and that was enough to move the meter. So here again is where KHRC is trying to hedge their bets. They're looking for quality projects, but they too are in a new area, if that makes sense. There's not a long case history of massive projects through this program because the funding was so small and the community population was much smaller.
Well, that's where my questions are. I think, if somebody has an idea, it would be good to move forward with it, considering what the other, how the others were granted, like what passed or what qualified. But again, I think the intent of these original rural grants was for rural areas. So I would like to know if they funded anything that had a university in it, a university city or a college or town gown kind of deal. I don't know what they
Yeah.
consider rural, even if it's a population of 60,000.
Pittsburgh's on here,
Yep,
we saw,
Pittsburgh.
in Emporia.
Yeah.
And it's a combination if we're talking MIH, it's a combination of single-family homes as well as multifamily structures. They've done duplexes, they've funded a fourplex, they've really funded, it goes back to what our needs analysis is and what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, the reason I bring that up is to see what did qualify, what was granted, and work our systems to where something that we can work with or the city commissioners can agree upon so that we would have a successful project as opposed to just having a project and hoping it's successful, but go with something that is successful and gear it towards whatever applications might be proposed. And again, if we're trying to get something out by June, you understand what kind of legwork or what kind of time that might take and what you would consider zoning or not zoning, or whatever it is, you would know that better than we would. So maybe work under those types of criteria and limitations.
Well, and I like the idea of throwing out some RFPs, yeah, requesting, let's find out what people are thinking and get it up to where the commission can kind of ponder it a little bit. And then we can decide if it's like, yeah, that's not what we want, or it's like, that's a great idea, or, because there's a lot of people up far more creative than us five up here, that's for darn sure, as far as what can be done on what piece of land, in what way, and that's where I'd like to go ahead and turn the creative developing land or real estate people loose and see what they can come up with, and then we can kind of in the background keep kind of working on, you get us your yes/no questions, and we'll kind of start getting a policy in place. But I think we could, for a while, judge each one on its own merits based on who's developing it, what they're developing, and then if we like it, and then if we sort of don't like it initially, then after we get our policy in place, if it fits our guidelines, we'll bring it back again and say, hey, now we've tweaked it, and it fits your guidelines, and then maybe we can move forward again or something.
And like we have planned, we're gonna go to the school district in the county and the intergovernmental and get them briefed as soon as we can.
Yep.
And I had one point I left off on my list. You know, we've been talking for 10 years about, you know, the terrible rental properties in town, and we've fought battles over rental inspection, which I've opposed. But I feel like this is an opportunity again, if we could target, you know, some of these dilapidated, as Linda mentioned, you know, buildings, and some of what people think is affordable rentals are the ones that are in decrepit condition. If we could somehow or other target these programs to that, so that somebody would buy up a couple of those and then renovate them and put them in a condition which meets the affordable idea, that I think is a good way to attack the problem of, you know, these substandard rental properties that have been around for a while. So I don't know if we can build that in or not, but that's been part of my thought process.
I would be happy to, in this first effort, to just give you your head. Go develop something that is creative, that you think will get passed, and have the commission working on the policy in the meantime, because we're gonna have to go down that path kind of slow. We don't know what to put in a policy. And we don't also, we have to stay close to that housing assessment, housing study we did, and what the priorities were in there. And so I am interested in you, like identifying an area that this would fit. And I do prefer the owner-occupied emphasis for this first effort. I want to be sure that we stay close to what we know about our community, and I'm certainly interested in working on the dilapidated ones.
All right, any other comments before we wrap this baby up? All right, well, thanks for coming here tonight. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Morse, second by Commissioner Reddy to adjourn. Please call the roll, clerk.
Yes.
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 All right, meeting adjourned.